You are currently the only person in this conference.
Michelle, can you hear me now? If there is communication, you can maybe tell me.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Hello? Are you gonna scare? So can we start? Ukiwa na kitabu andike. Tuache mchezo. Now you can hear me. I was saying, remember we have only one topic that we are supposed to discuss, and this topic is file system. Remember we have covered the others, but I want us to have a revision before the exam. And the first thing that you need to understand is the definition of terms. And the first term that you're supposed to define is what you call the file. The next term is the record. The next one is now what you call the attribute. And in another term, we call it field. So if I can start with the file, we always say that a file is a collection of related information. I think you understand what is information, no? So I will not repeat that. You have covered that in ICT and ethics. Then this file consolidates various documents because we say it is a composition of various documents. And the first thing that we need to understand is that a document is composed of various attributes. Where now we define what is an attribute. An attribute is a collection of related items. Sometimes we call them components or a presentation of characteristics. Right now, if we can talk about characteristics, right now, if I am using a phone, maybe I have a very small phone or a big phone. That is an attribute. So it means if I'm talking about a student, we can have a student file where this student has a file attribute. One attribute is the first name, maybe the second name, maybe the age, etc. So for these now presentations are the ones that now create a record. So a record is a collection of related attributes. Right now, if you have file, you have your first name, last name, maybe the course that you are doing, and we say we are now using your name like Michelle. So Michelle becomes a record because Michelle now you are Michelle is the first name, maybe Oro is the second name, and maybe you are doing ICT. So those are now the ones that we call a record. Another person becomes the second record. So for this now presentation, we understand that we have to create a structure in it. And for you to create that structure, that is when we use what we call the file system. And this file system is the one that we always understand as NTFS, new file, new technology file system, part 32, that is file allocation technology, etc., of which we will be able to discuss them. Then after that, we can understand about now what is a file structure. File structure is an organization of a file where one activity of an operating system is to create a file, to delete a file, and many other things that we always have. So with that, we can understand that those are operations. So operation of a file in operation of an operating system in file management is to always make sure that you can create a file, delete a file. I think you know what is deletion, deleting a file or what is deletion. or what is creation, what is appending. Well, we understand that appending is adding a file at the bottom of another file or another record that you have. So if you have these operations, you now need to understand how do we create these operations. We create these operations with a presentation of various types of files. And these various types of files are calling them document file, PDF file. Then the other one that we have RTF files, we have PIC files, where now we always use JPEG and PEG etc. And we understand that we have WAV, WAV. WAV, those are audio files that we use to play music. So we need to look at those presentations in different level of structure, because a structure is an organization. How do you organize PDF file? How do you organize a document file? How do you organize an RTF file? Because you understand an RTF file comes from text file, and that's why if you look at most of the files, at the end it has .t something, .txt, .pdf, .doc, meaning from the dot, those are extensions. But before the dot, those are the ones that we call what? The file names. That's why we always say that we have a file name called maybe operating system .doc. So operating system is the file name. Dot is an extension, which now introduces what we call a file type. So in this case, we can try to expand our interpretation by looking at now various directory presented on that. So Osman, welcome, so that we can
Yes.
continue that. And that is now why we need to understand that the presentation of a structure is organized with directories. If you look at traditional way of interpreting a directory, we were saying a directory is a folder, where we now define a folder as what? A folder is a collection of files. I know most of you sometimes define a file as we define a folder as a collection of maybe or a storage, but we don't say it's a storage, it is a collection of a file. So we need to understand it in a more clear way, where we can say a directory is a collection of files. And these files are document files, PDF files, and many other files. And most of these files, most of these directories that we always have, one of them is what we call the one-level directory. The next one that we have is what we call a two-level directory. And the next one that we have is what we call a cyclic level directory. And if we can start with the first one, and we start with the traditional one, which is a one-level directory. We understand this is a one-level entry. And being a one-level entry is where we can say, maybe we are presenting something like what? A file like A. If we can have a file like A, then we have another one like B, then we have another one like C, then we have another one like D. We are now saying we have a directory A, we have a directory B, we have a directory C, and we have a directory D. So for these directories, they have their own files. Maybe we have a file 1, a file 2, a file 3, a file 4. So out of these files that we have, we only have one entry. So we cannot allow many users to access these files at different levels. We have to access them one at a time. So if I access one, the directory 2 cannot access the file for directory A. The directory D cannot allow the user to access directory A if we are accessing directory D. So that is one level directory. And if you can now look at that directory, advantage of this is it is easy to implement because you only need a directory, which becomes a bottleneck where when you're tracing a file, it becomes hard. Because suppose maybe we have 20 files that we are now accessing. It is very hard for you to access those files in that directory. That's why we went now to what we call a two-level directory. And when you look at a two-level directory, now we are using a user presentation. So we have user one, we have user two, and then we have user three. So for these three users, they have their own directories and they have their own files. Let's say maybe we have the first user. So if you have the first user has directory A, has directory B, and has directory C. So in this case, if a user one has directory A, has a directory B, and has a directory C, the same case, a user two can have the same directory or different directory. Maybe you can have A, C, and K. So meaning, when the user one is accessing directory ABC, the user two can also access the directory A at the same time. So if you can look at this, there are some disadvantages here. One, if the user one is accessing directory A and the user two is accessing directory A again, meaning sometimes we can have some different files that are presented in A, which are supposed to be accessed by user one. So when you try to modify as user one, when user one tries to modify the directory A, we will interfere with the content for user two. So it means we can lose content. But what we have improved here is where when user one is accessing directories and files, still the user two is accessing the same files and the directories. Meaning we have multiple presentation of directories or multiple presentation of information. So we can now improve or we can increase the number of access or the number of users who are using the system. Just look at a concept where you are using your computer. Right now you are using your own computer as a standalone computer. You are using your own directory. If I want to use your computer, you have to switch your files first. You switch off your files so that I can use your computer. That becomes a one-level directory. But if now we are using a two-level directory, this is when you are using a networked operating system. Meaning that user one is accessing while another user is accessing. Right now we are using video conferencing. And when you are using video conferencing, you are using the same platform. And when you're using the same platform, you're using maybe the same directory or you're using a different directory. So in that case, now we are calling them what we call the two-level directory. But before we move to the next directory, because we have to understand these two-level directories or two directories that we have, we need to ask ourselves, when I create a file called X on my desktop, and this file is called .doc, then I create another one, I call it y.pdf. Those are different files that I have. So this file X and file Y is not interfering with any of it. But if I try to create a file called X in the same desktop, it means I overwrite the content. And when I overwrite the content, it means I change everything that was previously written on that file. So which becomes problem. But when I try to change the format, because from the dot, this is what we call the format. When I try to change the format, it will not interfere with the content. Even if I come and I say x.pdf. So I have x.doc and I have x.pdf. That means those are not interfering with the content. So that's why we are saying we can allow this directory, whereas when I create a file in A, it will not interfere with the content of another directory, or that file will not interfere with another file. And that is now where we can say we are now using a processing operating system. And for this case, we can try to understand that we have been limited to use different files. And because we don't want to create some limitation within these files, what we can do is now to come up with what you call a three-level directory. And in a three-level directory, we now create a directory where we can have various directories. Maybe we can have A, B, we can have C and D. But this directory, they have their own directories. So we have A again, B, maybe K, and L. So we are assuming the other directory, they can have other different directories. So it is a directory inside another directory. Meaning, if you create a folder, then we create another folder inside it. So we are saying we are creating a folder inside another folder. So here I have created a folder A, where we have said now we will not be calling it a folder, we will be calling it a what? A directory. Then we have created another directory A inside it because it allows that. And when you create that, it is not interfering with the first one. So it means we can allow more directories in it. And we can allow more small circle. Then we create another file and we create another file. So when I create this file, the only problem that we have is that if I create a directory here and I call it A here, then I call it B here, I call it A and I call it another B from a B directory. That is now what you call a master level directory. So in this three level directory, it allows what you call a master level directory, where we can now say if you create a directory in B and we create other files, we cannot share. So we are using many resources to create other files, and which now result to some issues, because if you try to create more resources in an operating system, we now create what you call harshness of this operating system. That's why you find that most of the operating system have. You're trying to load an operating system, but it is loading very slowly because now many directories has been created, and these directories are sharing the files where they are not supposed to share, where they are supposed to share, but they are not sharing. Because if I create a file for directory A in B directory, then I create another file in directory A of the same level. If this A now sharing of files. Let's first of all look at now that because there are some technical issues, and we'll be able to continue from there. Minute. any question that we can raise from that? Is there any question? So there is a platform that has been given that you can maybe pose some questions. Can you hear me?
The connection is somehow low.
Michelle, can you hear me? Oh, okay, let me connect then. We'll be able to communicate together. Then you can ask questions from there. Is it clear now? Isaac?
It's going off then turning back on.
Just a minute. We try to see whether it will work. I think now it is okay. Is it okay, Osman?
Not yet.
Okay. I think it's okay now. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can ask questions. I think you can maybe end at that point, so that now next time we can continue from there, from a cyclic level directory. So if there is a question, you can ask, please. Osman.
I don't have any at now.
I'm waiting for you, Michelle and Osman.
I don't have any.
You don't have any question, but have you understood anything on that?
I'm going to go through the PDF.
Okay,
the notes.
I have given you the PDF, but there are some diagrams that I have not presented, of which in the due time I will be able to present to you.
Okay.
Okay. So let us maybe continue from next week. And please tell your friends to connect. Serious?
Sasa.
Okay, sir. Michelle. Okay, have a nice day.